Queremos volver a enfatizar
We want to emphasize again that it was the situation of violence that determined the need to decree the state of constitutional exception on Friday, October 18th. That decision was not taken in a vacuum and without context, but was necessary to fulfill the responsibility that the state has as the first guarantor of the protection of human rights.
On Friday, thousands of Chileans flooded the streets of the capital, Santiago, burning President Sebastián Piñera's effigy to express anger at his government. Protesters also clashed with security forces, torching a police vehicle as officers fired tear gas and water cannons to disperse demonstrators. Anti-government rallies, which began back in mid-October over metro fare hikes, have left dozens of people dead and thousands injured. Joining us out of New York is Danny Shaw, professor of Latin American and Caribbean Studies. Hi, Daniel Shaw. It's a pleasure to have you on Press TV. Now, your thoughts on the protests in Chile and the government's response to them?
Yeah, this has been 2 months of a showdown between the popular sectors of Chile and the very hated plutocratic government of Sebastián Piñera, an individual worth about $4 billion, his own personal wealth. We've seen a great deal of repression and brutality. The courageous Chilean people led by students and women and youth who've been in the streets very fearlessly against this neoliberal regime.
And what is it about his policies and that of the government right now that's irking the people to come out in droves like this?
Well, it's the standard policies of neoliberalism that have put private property above people's needs. Pinochet may have been officially gone as of 1990, but the legacy of Pinochet-cismo has continued. State repression, 35 generals, even before these October protests, 35 generals had been indicted and fired because of corruption and extreme repression of the people. We've seen some 30,000 arrests of demonstrators. So this has only added gasoline to the fire and brought more Chileans into the streets.
And now, Danny, while the UN Human Rights Council said Chilean police used excessive force against protesters and are condemning the government, you have Chile's human rights minister saying that the protest required what she called an exceptional response. Was it warranted the way they treated protesters?
Well, ironically, just 3 days ago, December 10th, was International Human Rights Day. And on that day, 8 protesters were struck in the head with tear gas canisters, including a 15-year-old young girl who was then moved from one hospital to another inexplicably. So, of course, there's no justification for what's happened. And the UN High Commissioner of Human Rights, who's Chilean herself, former President Michelle Bachelet, there's a lot of contradictions because she's been one of the first to highlight purportedly Venezuela's human rights violations, but very slow to address what's happening in Bolivia, in Chile, what happened in Ecuador, what's happening in Haiti. So we see a certain double standard coming from the UN.
All right, D, good looking, man. Thank you for joining us out of New York. That's Mr. Danny Shaw, professor of Latin American and Caribbean Studies there.